Well, it's the beginning of a new year, and one of the things as a pastor that I look forward to coming out every year, right after that calendar flips in the church space, is the annual Carey Nieuwhof Church Trends. And sure enough, they're out. There's 7 of them, and there is so much to unpack in this year's trends. And so for each of the next 8 weeks, I'm going to do a deep dive into all of the trends and what it means for the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod. And in addition to that, I'm working with Carey and his team to host conversations for each of the 7 trends inside of his Art of Leadership Academy. And I'll tell you more about that at the end of today's video. It's free, and it's going to be a game changer, and it's going to be a great opportunity. All right, roll the intro video. Just kidding. I don't have an intro video. This is low production, but I'm hoping really high value for you. And so if you are new to this channel, hey, I'm Zach Zehnder. I'm a 4th generation LCMS pastor, and I love creating content that helps your church grow, both in quality and in quantity. Because what the world and what America needs is more healthy churches to grow. So in today's video, before we jump into Carey Nieuwhof's 7 church trends shaping 2026, we need to start with the trend underneath all the other trends. Because if we miss this one, we'll misunderstand everything that follows. And Carey calls this the meta trend. And so as we get into it, first, let's hear some positive signs from Carey Nieuwhof himself.
2025 was a really interesting year last year, right? It was the first year we began to see the stirrings and anecdotes associated with revival become statistically meaningful. Things really did begin to change. So we have a few stats, right? Bible sales, maybe you've heard this, they're up 41.5% since 2022. Spiritual app downloads rose 79.5% since 2019. And Christian music streams, they're up 50% since 2019. Now, according to Barna, even the number of Americans who say they have made a personal commitment to Jesus that is still meaningful in their lives is up 12 percentage points between 2022 and 2025.
So many great things are happening. Gosh, even just this last week, I read there is an America Reads the Bible event happening April 18 to 25th, where the entire Bible will be read aloud from Washington, D.C. 84 hours worth of scripture being read publicly. I mean, praise God. You can certainly feel, right, a shift as we move from 2025 into 2026 with people's perceptions of an openness to Jesus and to the Bible. That is real, and that's encouraging. And for those of us who've lived through decades of decline, it feels surprising in a good way. But this discernment doesn't mean we stop at celebration, because all these signs of renewal are happening, but they don't exist in isolation, and they exist inside a much larger story. And that's what Carey introduces, what he calls the meta trend, the reality that frames everything else. We're going to talk about it. And so let's hear the meta trend from Carey.
Despite all the positive evidence, the talk of revival, the stuff you see on Instagram, there's actually a meta trend hanging over every other church trend I'm going to share today, and that's the ongoing general decline of Christianity in America. So some very fresh data from Barna is showing that at the same time we're seeing some very positive trends I'm going to talk about, Christianity as a whole is less important to Americans than in the past. And more Christians than ever don't actually practice their faith. For example, in 2000, 74% of Christians said their faith was central to their lives. Today, it's 54%. That means that 46% of Christians do not consider their faith to be central to their lives, which is, I think you'd agree, probably an issue, right? Similarly, and this is huge, half of all U.S. adults now qualify as non-practicing Christians. In fact, of those who call themselves Christians, only 24% of Christians actively pursue their faith. That is a huge finding and a big change from 15 years ago, when more Christians actually practiced out their faith than didn't. So perhaps this helps explain the crisis in discipleship and partisanship that we're seeing in the church. And all of this confirms what we noted back in 2025.
And so this is the tension that we can't ignore. That at the same time, interest and openness are rising, commitment is thinning. In other words, what are people actually open and interested in? Is it a fully devoted following of Jesus, or is it some half-hearted, mediocre, non-practicing, but still identifying with Jesus and trying to live out some version of the American dream kind of faith? Yeah. So nearly half of self-identified Christians say faith is not central to their lives. Almost half of adults now qualify as non-practicing Christians, and only, as he said, about 1 in 4 Christians are actively pursuing their faith. And so here's the problem, as I like to say it, that our churches have created many believers, but very few followers. We have spent so much time and energy trying to get people to believe or to receive God's grace, or in some circles, to make decisions of faith, that we've neglected the deeper work of actually forming disciples of Jesus. And I am all for believing in Jesus and for conversions and celebrating baptisms like the rest of you. We ought to celebrate those things, but something isn't right if it's not resulting in people that are more devoted to Jesus. And I believe what Carey said is true. Think about this. About half of the people that exist right now in our nation are what Barna calls non-practicing Christians. That's a big deal. And that's not primarily a culture problem, a media problem, or a political problem. It is a discipleship problem. And it's exactly why I wanted to do a deep dive into all of these trends, because the meta trend has been saying for a decade now, what I've been saying is the number one problem in our church, which I also think is the number one opportunity, and it's discipleship. And this lands very close to home for the LCMS. And I think it's a pivotal moment that is both dangerous and promising. So here's why this moment is dangerous, because we could mistake spiritual curiosity for spiritual formation. Cultural Christianity once carried people toward the church. It does not do that anymore. The reality is people can find and get Jesus, if you will, online, on YouTube, through podcasts, you name it, and they are. And so we cannot and we should not assume that just because there is openness and curiosity that people are going to land in our churches. But here's why this moment is promising. Because moments like this are exactly where confessional Christianity shines. And underneath all of this is an opportunity where our Lutheran theology can truly stand out, right? Law that actually names sin, gospel that actually forgives it, baptism that is a gift from God and delivers ultimate confidence in a really shaky world, the Lord's Supper that delivers ongoing means of grace, and a cross that explains suffering instead of always trying to avoid it. But, and this matters deeply, all of this great theology doesn't really matter if it's not turning us into great disciples. And if I'm honest with you, collectively, we have struggled to take all of the great receiving of the great theology that we've done and had in the LCMS and turn it into good works that collectively reach the spiritually open and curious. And here's why, at least in my estimation, is we herald justification, the doctrine that we are saved by grace alone and not by our works. But, friends, just because we're saved by faith and not by works doesn't mean our works don't matter. Justification should lead to sanctification, to becoming more holy and being freed from our sin. And this has not happened naturally. And I know there are outliers to this, but we need to spend more time as Lutheran communicators talking about sanctification and the expectations that God has for those who believe in Jesus. It is not enough to simply point out law and gospel and then give little to no practical wisdom for what a life in Jesus actually looks like. And this is the great gap in our nation right now. People believe, but they're not sure what to do next. And rather than offering a nice pat Lutheran seminary answer of, you don't have to do anything, you're saved by grace, we need better answers that aren't lazy for what a disciple of Christ actually looks like. The don't have to do anything saved by grace answer is awesome for eternity, but it's lazy for right here and now. And this is what I've committed the last decade of my life to. I've said over and over again, the biggest thing missing from most churches in their discipleship isn't a lack of desire or intention. Churches want and desire to make disciples, but desire and intention don't move things. Churches need a clear plan or strategy to raise up disciples. And the number one thing far and away missing from plans and strategies is giving your people clear targets to shoot for that define what a disciple is. And this is the great opportunity in front of us to define clearly what it looks like to move from a non-practicing Christian to a practicing Christian, or from a believer to a disciple. And not only to define it, but to expect our people to live these sorts of lives, to call them to live these kind of lives. Spiritual openness does not automatically lead people to Jesus. It leads them to whoever shows up, whoever speaks clearly, and whoever forms them intentionally. And so we have an opportunity. And we'll talk more about that in the upcoming videos. And so as we walk through these 7 trends, here's the posture we need as a synod that I'm taking: hopeful, not naive; encouraged, but not complacent; humble, asking where can I grow and adapt to bring more people to Jesus; confident in our theology, but more urgent in our mission. Christianity and Lutheranism in America may be shrinking, but the church that actually forms disciples has never been more necessary. And if we collectively are hurting and our numbers are trending more and more negative, which they are, at some point we have to ask the question underneath all these trends: are we more interested in preserving our structures or forming disciples? And so here's the headline for this meta trend: openness and curiosity are high, but commitment to Jesus is low. And the future of the LCMS and any church body really will depend on how we, pastors and leaders, help people actually follow Jesus. So in each of these videos, I want to leave you with at least one question to ponder. Today, I've got 2. Number 1, what would need to change in your church, not theologically, but practically, for a non-practicing Christian to actually become a disciple of Jesus? Let me hear you in the answers below. And number 2, how would you define what it looks like to be a disciple of Jesus at your church? What targets are important to hit? Hey, in the next video, we'll look at trend number 1, a really amazing thing: why Gen Z is now leading the surge in church attendance, and why this moment could renew the church body, or how we could completely miss it. And hey, I mentioned partnering with Carey and his team. Here's what's cool. Every Wednesday at noon Central, starting January 21st, inside of Carey's Art of Leadership Academy, I'll be hosting conversations, sometimes bringing in experts alongside me, and we're going to unpack each of these trends through the lens of how do we use these trends to make greater disciples at our church. It's one thing to notice a trend. That's what Carey helps us see. But I want to go further and get more practical. And so I hope I'll see you inside of the academy. We can dive into your questions there as well, live every Wednesday at noon. And here's the deal: it is free to join. And the link is in the description. Again, it all starts January 21st. And I'm honored and grateful for Carey and his team and to be able to come alongside him and hopefully you. Come on, in this journey. This moment matters. Let's not miss it. Come on, 2026. Let's do it.